My suit was hanging on the back of the bedroom door, pressed, perfect, ready. The rings were in a velvet box on my nightstand, and every time I walked past them, I felt this quiet kind of pride. The kind that only comes when you think your life is finally going exactly the way you planned it. 8 days. 8 days until I married Emily. That night, I told her I was going to grab food from the Italian place down the street. She kissed me on the cheek, said she was tired, said she was going to get an early night. She smelled like the perfume I bought her for her birthday. She looked happy. I was 3 blocks from the restaurant when I saw it. My father's black Mercedes, parked in the side lot next to Caruso's. The engine was running. I almost didn't stop. My father had dinner meetings all over the city. It could have been nothing. But something made me slow down. Some instinct I didn't even know I had. I pulled over. I could see them through the window. Emily was in the passenger seat. Her shoulders were shaking. She was crying. Not softly, not politely, but the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and ugly. My father was leaning toward her. His hand was on her wrist. Not holding it, gripping it. I cracked my window, and I heard my father say, in that calm, measured voice he uses when he wants people to understand there is no room to argue, "You've already gone too far. There's no going back now." I sat there. I didn't move. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't knock on the window or pull open the door. I just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel and watched the woman I was going to marry cry in my father's car while he held her wrist like a leash. I drove home. I sat in the dark living room for 2 hours. I didn't know it yet, but I had spent 3 years loving the woman my own family had planted in my life. Her name was Emily Hartwell. She was 29 when we met, and the kind of beautiful that sneaks up on you. Not loud, not trying. She had this way of listening to you that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We met at an art gallery opening. I'm not a gallery person. My college friend dragged me, and I almost left after 20 minutes. Then Emily made a dry comment about an abstract painting that looked like a child's fever dream, and I laughed harder than I had in months. We talked for 3 hours. I asked for her number. She gave it to me without hesitating. By the 3rd date, I knew I was in trouble. She was warm in ways I didn't expect. She remembered things, small things. She remembered that I didn't like cilantro after I mentioned it once in passing. She remembered that I called my grandfather Pop and that he died 2 years before I met her. She asked about him. She actually wanted to know. 6 months in, she had a spare key to my apartment. A year in, she moved in. We built a life together out of small things. Morning coffee before either of us was fully awake. Her stealing my hoodies and pretending she didn't know where they went. Late nights on the couch debating things that didn't matter. She used to fall asleep with her head on my shoulder, and I used to sit there long after I was tired because I didn't want to move and wake her. We talked about children. She wanted 2. I said I'd take whatever we got. When I proposed, she cried. Real tears, or what I believed were real tears. She said yes before I finished the sentence. Her hands were shaking. For 3 years, I would have bet my life on this woman. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was not wrong about how much I loved her. That part was real. That part will always be the worst part. My father, Richard Carter, is not a warm man. He's 62 years old. He built his company from a regional construction firm into a portfolio of real estate and private equity that made him wealthy enough to stop caring what anyone thought of him. He is controlled, precise, and cold in the way that powerful men are when they've stopped needing people for anything except function. He met Emily about 4 months into our relationship. A Sunday dinner at his house. My mother cooked. Emily brought wine. I watched my father when Emily walked in. Most people, new girlfriends, business partners, anyone he hadn't assessed yet, got a pause, a calculation. His eyes would move over you slowly before his expression settled. When Emily walked in, there was no pause. He already knew what he thought. He stood up, extended his hand, and said, "Emily, finally." And he smiled, which he almost never did, and said the dinner was the best he'd had in years. Emily smiled back. She said, "He's exactly what I expected." I thought she meant it as a compliment about how I'd described him. I laughed. My mother laughed. My father laughed, just a half-second later than everyone else. At the time, none of it meant anything to me, but I keep going back to that dinner now. I keep going back to that sentence. He's exactly what I expected. Not, he seems wonderful. Not, I can see where you get it from. Exactly what I expected. Like she had been briefed. At one point, Emily reached for her glass, and my father said, without thinking, "Careful, Em." M, not Emily. The kind of name you use when you have said it before, quietly, in rooms where no one else was supposed to hear it. Emily froze. My mother looked up, and I laughed because I was still stupid enough to help them hide it from me. About 8 months into dating Emily, I met Noah. He was 4 at the time. He had this mop of dark hair and these serious brown eyes that were slightly too big for his face, and he studied everything before he touched it, like the world needed to be inspected first. Emily said he was her nephew, her younger sister's boy. Her sister was going through a hard stretch. She didn't say exactly what kind, and Emily helped out when she could. She babysat on weekends, took him to the park. Sometimes he stayed the night. I adored him. I mean that. I genuinely loved that kid in the easy, uncomplicated way that happens when a child just decides you're safe. Noah decided I was safe after about 20 minutes, when I got on my hands and knees and helped him build a Lego fire station on Emily's living room floor. After that, I was Ryan, with a capital R, said very seriously, with great importance, like my name was a title. One afternoon, he must have been about 5 by then, he was half asleep on the couch with his head in Emily's lap, and she was stroking his hair, and he said, soft and drowsy, "Mommy." Emily's hand went still. She looked up at me, and something flashed across her face. Panic, maybe, or guilt, but it was gone so fast I almost missed it. "He does that sometimes," she said. She said it lightly. She said her sister worked nights, and Noah spent so much time with Emily that the lines blurred for him. She said it was sweet, actually, that he felt so safe with her. She said it like she had said it before. Not stumbled, not searched, said it, like a line she knew. Later that night, after Noah fell asleep, I walked past the guest room and saw Emily standing in the doorway. She was just watching him. Not like an aunt, like a woman looking at the only part of her life she couldn't afford to lose. I came up behind her and put my hand on her shoulder. She jumped. Actually jumped. Then she smiled too fast and said, "Sorry, you scared me." But I remember thinking something I didn't want to think. Why would an aunt look guilty for loving her nephew? I told myself it made sense, because the alternative was something I did not want to look at. 6 months before the wedding, my father got involved in ways he never had before. He offered to pay for everything. Not contribute, pay for everything. The venue, the catering, the honeymoon, the rehearsal dinner. He insisted. My father is generous in calculated ways. He gives when giving benefits him. He does not write blank checks out of sentiment. He also pushed the date. When Emily and I had originally talked about a long engagement, maybe 18 months, he said that was too long. He said, "These things drag on, and dragging changes things." He pushed for a date within the year. He got involved in the guest list. He suggested we include several of his business associates. He said things like, "This family needs to be settled properly," and "The right foundation matters more than people realize." One night, after dinner at his house, he pulled me aside in the hallway. Emily was in the kitchen helping my mother. Noah was asleep on the couch. My father looked toward the living room and said, "That boy needs structure." I said, "Noah?" He nodded. Then he looked at me and said, "A weak man avoids responsibility. A strong man gives a child his name." At the time, I thought he was testing me. Now I understand he was preparing me. The language was strange. It was the kind of language you use about a transaction, not a wedding. Emily thought it was sweet that he was so invested. I started to find it suffocating. But he was my father, and I was 31 years old, and still, God help me, still wanting his approval. So I let it go. 3 months before the wedding, Emily and I were walking through the park near our apartment. Noah was with us. He was running ahead, chasing pigeons with the dedication of someone who fully believed this was the day he would finally catch one. Emily was talking about the venue, flowers, seating arrangements, whether her aunt could sit anywhere near her mother without it becoming a diplomatic incident. And then she said, casually, not even looking at me, "After the wedding, we should think about Noah's situation more seriously." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She paused. She was watching Noah. "He needs stability. My sister she's not in a place to give him that consistently. And he loves you. It could be good. For all of us." "Are you talking about adoption?" She turned to me then, and her eyes were soft and careful. "I'm just saying it's worth thinking about. Down the road." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I said we could talk about it. But I remember thinking, and I pushed the thought away immediately, why does she already have an answer for what our family should look like? We hadn't even talked about having our own children yet. We hadn't even set up a joint bank account. But she had the next 5 years of our family structure mapped out. A week later, she brought it up again. This time, there were papers. Not official documents, she said, just information. Just something she had printed from a family law website. She laid them on the kitchen counter beside my coffee like she was leaving me a grocery list. I remember staring at the word adoption. She saw my face and immediately touched my arm. "Not now," she said softly. "I'm not pressuring you." But that was the thing about Emily. She never pushed like she was pushing. She made it sound noble. Then she said, "That's what I love about you, Ryan. You don't run from people who need you." At the time, I thought it was love. Now I know it was a leash. I pushed the thought away. I was good at that. I've already told you what I saw. Emily in my father's car. Her crying. His hand on her wrist. Those words, "You've already gone too far. There's no going back now." When I got home, I sat in the dark for 2 hours. Then Emily came home. She walked in quiet, said she'd had trouble sleeping and gone for a drive. She kissed my forehead and went to bed. She lied to my face with her eyes clear and her voice steady. I lay next to her in the dark for a long time. The next morning I asked her, as casually as I could manage, if she'd talked to my father recently. She didn't flinch. She looked up from her coffee and said, "Last week, actually. He reached out about the wedding gift. He didn't want you to know. He's planning something personal. Private. He made me promise not to say anything." She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "Everything I've done has been because I love you. You know that." I asked her one more question. "Why were you crying?" For the first time, she hesitated. Only half a second. But when you love someone, you know the rhythm of their lies before you know they are lies. She said, "Because your father is intense. He made me feel like I wasn't good enough for this family." Then she looked down. Perfect timing. Perfect shame. Perfect little break in her voice. And I hated myself because part of me still wanted to comfort her. I nodded. But I heard it. Everything I've done. Not everything I do. Everything I've done. Past tense. Retrospective. Like she was accounting for a period of time that needed to be covered. I smiled at her, and I started making calls. I called Marcus, a college friend who works in financial compliance, and I told him I needed a favor. I needed someone to look into a company called Gray Line Consulting. I'd seen the name, once, in an email Emily left open on her laptop. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. A consulting invoice. I figured it was freelance work she'd done. I forgot about it within an hour. I remembered it the night I sat in the dark. Marcus called me back in 48 hours. Gray Line Consulting was a shell company, registered in Delaware, active for 6 years. It had one client, or rather, one source of incoming funds, that routed through 2 intermediary accounts before landing at Gray Line. Those funds traced back to a holding company owned by Richard Carter. Gray Line had been making monthly payments to Emily Hartwell for 5 years, 1 year before we met. I sat with that number for a long time. 1 year before we met. Before the gallery opening. Before my friend dragged me out. Before she made that dry comment about the painting and I laughed harder than I had in months. 1 year before all of it. That was when I started wondering if the gallery opening had been an accident. I replayed that night in my head. The way she had been standing near the exit. The way she had made the first comment. The way she had laughed just enough to keep me talking. At the time, it felt like fate. Now it felt like a woman waiting for her target to walk into the room. I still wasn't sure what I was looking at. I told myself there could be explanations. Business relationships my father had. Consulting work he'd contracted out. Maybe Emily knew my father professionally. Maybe it was a coincidence with a clean explanation. I almost believed it. Then Marcus sent me one more thing. I went to my father's office on a Tuesday. He was in meetings all afternoon, and his assistant let me wait in his private office. She'd done it 100 times before. I don't know what I was looking for exactly. Something. Anything. I found a box of printed photographs in the bottom drawer of his credenza. Old ones. Printed, not digital. My father is old-fashioned about certain things. I went through them, and there she was, Emily. Younger, maybe 23, 24, smiling, at what looked like a private dinner somewhere expensive. And next to her, with his hand at the small of her back and his expression relaxed in a way I had never seen it, not at home, not at his own dinner parties, was my father. Not business, not casual, intimate. The way you stand next to someone when they are yours. I flipped through the photos, 3 of them, 4. And then I found the one that made my stomach drop. Emily, in the same location, same time period judging by the clothes, but in this photo, she was turned sideways. She was pregnant. I put the photos back, exactly as I found them. I thanked my father's assistant on the way out. I drove to a parking garage on 6th and sat on the roof with my hands in my lap. At the time, I thought that was the worst thing I would find. I was wrong. I called Marcus again. I asked him to find anything he could about Emily's family, her sister, the sister's child. He came back to me in 24 hours. Emily had no sister. She had a brother, older, living in Phoenix. No children. The birth certificate for a child named Noah Hartwell listed Emily as the mother. The father line was blank. Noah was Emily's son. I sat with that for 6 hours before I could move. I kept seeing him, chasing pigeons in the park, asleep on Emily's lap, his 2 big brown eyes closed, saying my name like it was a title, building a Lego fire station with me on the floor while Emily watched from the kitchen doorway with a look on her face that I had always read as happiness. Noah was not her nephew. He was her child. And if the payments from Gray Line Consulting went back 5 years, if the money started a year before Emily and I even met, then Richard Carter had been funding Emily long before she was ever my girlfriend. I went back to my father's office 3 days later. He was traveling. I got in with my own key. I knew the combination to his safe. I had for years in case of emergencies. He'd given it to me when I was 22 and never changed it. Inside the safe was a folder. Inside the folder was a DNA test. Noah Hartwell, Richard Carter. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Noah was my father's son. Noah was my half-brother. And they had brought him into my home and asked me to love him and planned to have me legally adopt him after the wedding. That was the moment I understood. My father had never seen me as a son. He had seen me as a solution. I waited until we were home, just the 2 of us. I made dinner. I cooked, which she found romantic, which made me feel sick. And I let her pour wine and talk about centerpieces, and then I put the folder on the table between us. She looked at it. She didn't touch it. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" She denied it first. Of course she did. She said it was complicated. There was context. She could explain. I let her talk. I watched her face. I watched her construct the story in real time, watched her choosing which door to open and which one to keep shut. Then I put Noah's birth certificate on the table. And she stopped talking. She cried. Real tears. And I hated that I still couldn't tell the difference. She said she was sorry. She said she knew it wasn't enough. She said she never wanted this to hurt me. Tell me everything, I said, from the beginning. What she said next made me realize she had practiced this conversation. She said Richard approached her when Noah was 6 months old. She was alone, broke, terrified. He offered her financial support in exchange for secrecy. He would fund her life, but Noah could never be publicly acknowledged as his. Then, when Noah was about 2, Richard came to her with the next part of the plan. She would be introduced into Ryan's life, casually, organically. She would make him fall in love with her. They would marry. After the wedding, she would suggest the adoption. Ryan would sign. Noah would legally become Ryan's son. Richard's name would never appear anywhere. She said she agreed because she was desperate. She said the first year was a plan. I asked her, "So what was our first kiss?" She covered her mouth. I asked, "What was the first night you stayed over? What was my birthday? What was the night you met my mother and told me you finally felt like you had a family?" She started crying harder. I said, "Were those real memories for you, Emily? Or were they progress reports?" She whispered, "Ryan, please." But I needed her to say it, so I asked, "When did I stop being the assignment?" She didn't answer, and that silence told me more than any confession could have. "But the last 2 years were real," she said. "Ryan, I swear to you, what I feel for you, it's real. It grew into something I didn't expect. I didn't know how to get out." She reached for my hand. I let her take it. I almost believed her. That's the part I've never admitted to anyone until now. I sat across from a woman who had been placed in my life like a chess piece by my own father, and some part of me, the part that had loved her for 3 years, that had proposed to her, that had built a life around her, still wanted to believe her. But love does not erase 3 years of daily lying. It just makes the lying hurt more. I had already decided not to forgive her before I found the messages, but the messages made it clean. Final. No part of me second-guessing in the dark at 3 a.m. Emily's phone had shared cloud backup with her laptop. I found the thread between her and her mother. Her mother had written, "Just get him to the wedding. After the adoption, he won't be able to walk away. He'll be legally tied." Emily replied, "He's a good man. That's what makes this hard." Her mother answered, "Good men are easier. They want to believe the best." Then Emily wrote something that made me put the phone down and walk outside because I thought I was going to be sick. "I know. Sometimes I think I really love him. That's the problem. Not, I love him. Not, I can't do this to him. The problem. My love had become an inconvenience in a plan she had already agreed to finish. She had told her mother I was easy to use because I was good. My kindness was not something she protected. It was something she budgeted. The thing that still makes me sick is not that she lied. It's how long she let me love the lie. I want to be clear. I could have called her that night. I could have ended it quietly, privately, with some measure of dignity for everyone involved. I chose not to. Not because I was weak, not because I still hoped for something, because my father was going to stand in a room in 6 days and toast to family and loyalty and love. Because Emily's mother was going to sit at a table and smile at me with my kindness in her pocket like loose change. Because there were business associates, family friends, a pastor, relatives who had flown in, a room full of people who were going to witness my family present themselves as something clean. I wanted them all in the same room. I wanted no one to be able to look away. The night before the rehearsal dinner, Emily fell asleep beside me with her hand on my chest. I lay there awake, staring at the ceiling. Her engagement ring caught the light every time she moved. For one insane second, I wondered if I could just pretend I didn't know. Marry her. Protect Noah. Keep my mother from being humiliated. Let my father win, just so the house didn't burn down. Then Emily shifted in her sleep and whispered my name. Not Richard's. Mine. And somehow that made it worse. Because if any part of her love was real, it meant she had looked at me every day and chosen the lie anyway. Emily looked beautiful. I want to say that because it matters. She wore a cream dress, she had her hair up. She laughed at the right moments and touched my arm and said my name with warmth. And if I hadn't known what I knew, I would have been the happiest man in the room. My father gave a toast. He stood up and he held his champagne glass and he said, "I am not going to forget this as long as I live." He said, "Family is everything, and the mark of a good family is honesty, loyalty, the willingness to protect one another no matter the cost. Tonight, I am proud to welcome Emily into ours, because she understands what this family stands for." He raised his glass. People clinked. People smiled. My mother, quiet, dignified, exhausted, held her glass and did not drink. He sat down, and I stood up. I said, "I want to tell everyone the real story of this family." People smiled. They thought it was a toast. They thought it was going to be sentimental. I had brought a projector. I had told the venue it was for a romantic slideshow. Nobody questioned it. The first image was a photograph of Emily and my father at dinner, her hand on his expression open in a way I had never seen it with my mother. The room went quiet. The second image was the bank transfer records. Gray Line Consulting, monthly payments, 5 years, Emily's account. Someone whispered. Someone else pushed back their chair. The third image was the prepared adoption documents, dated 6 months before our engagement, with Noah's name already filled in and a blank line where my signature was supposed to go. Emily made a sound I had never heard from her. Low. Broken. The fourth image was the text messages between Emily and her mother. Emily's mother shot up from her chair. "Turn that off," she snapped. "This is private." I looked at her and said, "So was my life. You didn't care then." Her face twisted. My father stood up slowly, trying to regain control of the room. "Ryan, enough." That one word almost made me laugh. Enough. For 3 years, they had arranged my life behind my back. They had watched me fall in love, watched me bond with Noah, watched me plan vows around a woman who had entered my life through a contract. But now that people were seeing the truth, suddenly there was such a thing as enough. Emily stood up too. Her hands were shaking. "Ryan, please," she whispered. "Not in front of everyone." I looked at her. "You were going to make me sign adoption papers in front of a judge." She flinched like I had slapped her. Someone in the room gasped. Then my Aunt Linda said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Wait, Richard is the boy's father?" That was the moment the room changed. Before that, people thought they were watching a broken engagement. After that, they understood they were watching a family rot open in public, projected on a screen in a restaurant where 60 people had come to celebrate. Good men are easier. They want to believe the best. Then I played the audio. My father's voice from a call I recorded after I finally knew which questions to ask. "Ryan will sign after the wedding. He won't question it. He never questions anything." My father lunged toward the projector. Not fast enough. My best man stepped in front of him. For the first time in my life, I saw Richard Carter look helpless. Not poor, not weak, not sorry, exposed. And there is a difference. The room was completely silent. My father stayed frozen near the projector, his face the color of ash. He said my name once, "Ryan," in a voice that was trying to be authoritative and couldn't quite get there. Emily's mother grabbed her purse. The pastor stepped back from the table, and my mother, quiet, dignified, 28 years of married life on her hand, reached down, removed her wedding ring, and placed it on the table in front of her without a word. Then she looked at my father and said the first cruel thing I had ever heard come out of her mouth. "You made him raise your shame for you." No one moved. My father opened his mouth, but nothing came out, because for once, there was no contract, no check, no lawyer, and no threat that could make the truth sound clean. I looked at Emily, then at my father, then at Noah, who was too young to understand why every adult in the room suddenly looked ashamed. And I said, "Noah is not my shame to hide. Emily is not my wife to forgive. And Richard Carter is not the man this family is going to protect anymore." Then I looked at the room one last time. The wedding is canceled. Then I walked out. And for the first time in my life, nobody in that family had the power to call me back. My mother filed for divorce within a month. Richard's involvement with Gray Line Consulting created significant legal exposure. Using a shell company to fund a scheme involving fraudulent adoption documents is not something you walk away from cleanly, even with expensive lawyers. He was forced to step down from his position at the company. He was also compelled, through legal proceedings, to formally acknowledge Noah as his son. A trust was established for Noah. He will be taken care of. He did nothing wrong. He was 5 years old and innocent in every way that mattered, and whatever I felt about the rest of it, I never forgot that. Emily's mother faced legal consequences for her role in preparing the false adoption documents. Emily herself, I left her. Permanently. Completely. The part people don't tell you about public humiliation is that it keeps happening after the room empties. Emily lost friends. Not all of them. Some people still believed she had been trapped by Richard's money and power. But enough people saw the messages. Enough people saw the note. Enough people understood that desperation might explain the first lie, but it did not explain 3 years of sleeping beside me while planning what I would sign after the wedding. For 3 weeks, she called. Then she wrote letters. In every one, she said the same thing in different ways. That she loved me. That she was sorry. That the last 2 years were real. That she would spend the rest of her life making it right if I gave her the chance. I didn't answer. 2 months later, she moved out of the city. Her last letter was waiting in my mailbox the week she left. It said, "I did love you." I believe her. That is not the same thing as forgiving her. I didn't stay away because I stopped caring. I stayed away because love that starts as a transaction never fully becomes something else. You can't unknow the architecture. The real punishment didn't happen when I walked away. It happened every day afterward, when she had to live with the fact that she destroyed the one man who would have given her everything without being paid to do it. 3 weeks after the rehearsal dinner, a document arrived at my door. An old agreement, printed on paper, professionally formatted, signed. The date was from 4 months before the gallery opening where I met Emily. The language was careful. It outlined an arrangement in which Emily Hartwell agreed to cultivate a relationship with Ryan Carter with the possible objective of marriage. In exchange for financial support through Gray Line Consulting, she agreed to gradually build trust and pursue a long-term arrangement with specific targets outlined. At the bottom, in handwriting I recognized, I had seen it in birthday cards, in notes left on my kitchen counter, in a letter she wrote me once when I was traveling and she said she missed me too much to wait until I was home. At the bottom, Emily had written a note. Just one line. A first impression, recorded on paper the night she agreed to the plan. He seems kind. This might actually work. There was one more thing attached to the agreement, a guest list from the gallery opening. My name was highlighted. Beside it, in Richard's handwriting, were 3 words. Approach him first. So even the story I used to tell people, the spilled wine, the painting, the laugh, the moment I thought fate had finally done something kind for me, had been staged. She did not bump into my life. She was sent into it. She chose me because she thought kindness made me easy. For 3 years, I thought Emily loved the best parts of me. My patience, my loyalty, my need to believe people were better than they were. But those were not the things she fell for first. Those were the handles they used to move me. She did not just break my heart. She learned how it worked, found the softest place, and pressed there until I called it love.
And that is the part I still can't make peace with. For 3 years, I thought I was building a family. I was actually being fitted into a cover story. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me. I made it through. But I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself when you answer it. Emily told me the first year was a plan. She told me the last 2 years were real. What if she was telling the truth about that? What if love can genuinely grow out of something calculated and cold and wrong? Does it matter? Does the real love cancel the lie? Or does the lie contaminate everything that came after it? Could you ever forgive someone who started by using you, if they later claimed they truly loved you? Leave it in the comments. I read every one.